This woman spent 21 days alone in the wilderness after surviving a plane crash. Though she was covered in the blood of strangers, had to eat bugs and drink rainwater to stay alive, was then hunted by an elusive predator that she could never see. But how did she survive? And why is her story only just being told now? It's me, and this is Alone in the Wilderness, the terrifying survival story of Juliane Koepcke. Imagine you survived a plane crash, but when you wake up, you realize you're completely alone. There's nothing but thick jungle all around you. You don't know where you are or how you got there. The days go by, and you still haven't found anyone. And then you start hearing strange noises at night, the snap of a twig, the sound of heavy footsteps, the growl of an animal. And you start thinking, what if I'm not alone here? Well, that's exactly what happened to Juliane. But first, let's rewind to December 1971, when Juliana's nightmare actually began. Her mother, Maria, worked for a German research institute in Peru and was traveling back and forth from Lima to Pucallpa. In a small plane with some colleagues and their families, Juliana, who was only 17 at the time, was riding along with them, strapped into the right wing of the plane for the ride of her life. They were going to do some research in the Amazon jungle, and Juliana wanted to tag along. She sat in the wing for most of the flight, so that she could take photos while the plane flew over the jungle canopy. It was also cheaper than sitting inside. But soon after takeoff, Juliana felt the plane suddenly drop. When she turned to her left to look out of the wing, she saw a flash of lightning and heard a crack of thunder. The plane had been struck by lightning and began to fall. Juliana screamed for help as the plane plummeted toward the trees below. She tried to brace herself, but it was too late. The world spun around her as she was thrown through the air. And when she hit the ground, everything went black. When Juliana came to, she found herself lying on the forest floor, dazed and confused. She had cuts and bruises all over her body, and blood was dripping down her face. But miraculously, she was alive. She looked around her and realized with horror that the plane had crashed. She spotted her mother's lifeless body slumped over in a nearby tree, but Juliana was too scared to approach her. Instead, she did something incredible. Juliana dragged herself over to a stream, splashed water onto her face, and walked away. That was when she noticed something horrific. The water was filled with the blood of other passengers who had also survived the crash. Their flesh was torn apart, and their bones were broken. With her mother dead and the other passengers mangled beyond recognition, Juliana knew that she had to get out of that forest alive. She used a stick to probe the ground beneath her and make sure that it was safe to walk on before slowly making her way deeper into the jungle. At first, she couldn't remember anything about where she was or how she'd gotten there. But as she walked, her memories began to come flooding back. She remembered the crash, the pain, the blood. And when she looked down at her feet, she realized that she was covered head to toe in someone else's blood. The blood of strangers. As the day wore on, Juliana's body began to ache. She was exhausted and terrified, and had no idea where she was or where she was going. But she kept walking until she finally collapsed under a bush and fell fast asleep. In the morning, she woke up feeling refreshed and ready to keep walking. She knew that if she didn't keep moving, she would die. Either the jungle would kill her or something living inside it would. So she set off deeper into the wilderness, foraging for food and drinking rainwater that collected in tree holes. Every day, she walked for hours, sometimes climbing over fallen logs and pushing aside thick vines. The further she walked, the more afraid she became, because every time she stopped to rest, she could hear strange noises in the trees, the snapping of twigs, the sound of heavy footsteps. But she never saw anything. Then one night, she realized that these sounds weren't following her. She heard them everywhere. She had been hearing the sounds of the jungle itself. One evening, though, the sounds took a sinister turn. She heard what sounded like screams in the night, loud and piercing. Juliana ran for her life, stumbling through the undergrowth and tripping over roots. She climbed up into a tree and stayed there all night, too afraid to sleep. The next morning, she climbed down and made her way to a nearby river. She drank some water and then decided to follow it downstream. Maybe she'd find someone there. But instead, she found more signs of the plane crash. More of her classmates and their parents lay dead in the mud, and Juliana began to lose hope. She was tired of eating bugs and drinking rainwater, and she missed solid food. She walked until her feet were raw and bleeding, and she couldn't walk any further. She had to rest, but she was too afraid to sleep on the ground. So instead, she climbed up into another tree and curled up in its branches. That's when the predator started stalking her. Every night it would creep up the tree and sniff at her face. Then it would jump down and slink away into the bushes. She never saw the creature, but she could feel its hot breath on her neck and hear it snarling outside the tree. It must have been some kind of wild dog or maybe a cat. She didn't know, but it kept coming back every night, drawn to her like a moth to a flame. For 9 nights in a row, Juliane slept in the tree with the creature below her, growling and snarling in the darkness. She survived on rainwater and berries, which she picked from the branches above her. But as the days went by, she became weaker and weaker. And finally, on the 21st day, she just couldn't go on. She slid down the tree and collapsed on the forest floor. As darkness fell, she could hear the predator circling closer and closer. She closed her eyes tight, waiting for the attack, but it never came. When she opened her eyes again, she saw a man standing over her. A man from the Peruvian Air Force who'd been searching for survivors. He helped her up and led her out of the jungle and back to civilization. She had survived 21 days alone in the wilderness, but her ordeal was far from over. When she got back to Lima, she was taken to a hospital where doctors performed surgery on her feet, which had been badly damaged by the crash. She also suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, which caused her to have nightmares and panic attacks. She relived the crash over and over in her mind and felt guilty that she had survived when so many others had died. She blamed herself for getting on the plane in the first place and wondered if she should have done more to help the other survivors. But despite all the physical and emotional scars that she had been left with, Juliane was determined to move on with her life. She eventually married and had children and became a respected member of her community. But she never forgot the 21 days she had spent alone in the wilderness, the hunger, the thirst, the fear, and she never forgot the predator that had stalked her through the jungle. But now her story is being told for the first time, more than 50 years after the crash. And she hopes that by sharing her experience, she can help others who have survived traumatic events to move on with their lives. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think the predator was that stalked Juliane through the jungle? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to watch another scary wilderness survival story, then check out this video. Thanks for watching.